We begin, we'd like to thank our sponsors who've made this presentation possible today. And we'll just wait just to see. I think there's a few more people coming in. Okay, we can go to the next slide. Welcome to Unpacking the IEP and Special Education Processes. We thank all of you today for joining us at Parents as Partners Virtual Conference 2020, and we hope that all of your questions will be answered today. I am Natasha Subban, a special education inclusion consultant with the Toronto District School Board, and I'm joined today by my colleagues, Kelly Brejo and Monica Carey, who are also special education inclusion consultants for the Toronto District School Board. And we're also joined by our coordinator of the Special Education Inclusion Department, Laura Schilling. So we're inviting all of you to introduce yourself using the chat. The chat is located in the bottom center portion of your screen. You just click the box that says chat. In there, that's where all your questions can be sent directly to myself, Natasha Subban. And at the end of our presentation, we will leave time for all of you to have your questions answered as best as possible. We're also asking that if anyone needs closed captioning at the top, actually, I don't see it here today, but at the top corner, you're able to click down and receive the closed caption, which will take you to another screen. This presentation is recorded, so we are asking, when asking questions, if you're turning on your microphone, to please refrain from using student first and last names, school names, and other staff names, as this is a recorded session. Thank you. At the TDSB, we always begin by establishing norms in our meetings, and we're asking that everyone stay engaged. It's okay to experience discomfort. At the same time, we expect and accept non-closure. So if you leave this meeting with still a lot of question, it is okay, because as we are continuing to learn as educators and parents, all of your questions will be answered in the continuum of your child's learning. When you're speaking, please speak your truth, as we will. These norms have been adapted from Courageous Conversations About Race through the work of Glenn Singleton and Curtis Linton. Our goals today are to explore the individual education plan as a working document developed in partnership with the parent, guardian, caregiver, and with the student, where appropriate. Our second goal is to view the IEP within the context of the special education processes using an exclusionary, equitable, and strengths-based approach to supporting student achievement and well-being here at the TDSB. Our last goal is to learn about the different levels of support in both person and in virtual school. The agenda is following. Processes. So first we'll begin with the in-school support team, which is also known as an IST meeting that many of you may have attended in your past. A school support team, which is also known as an SST meeting. Then we will begin with the development of the IEP, parents as partners, and what a parent consultation looks like and how that's developed with the classroom teacher. We will then take an in-depth look at the components of the IEP. And last but not least, we will look at the levels of support when students are in person school or in virtual schools.
Thanks, Natasha. So we're going to talk a little bit about Learning for All. This is a ministry document, and you can find it by going on to the Ministry of Education site. What I love about this document is the shared beliefs that are in front of you today. And I'm just going to read the points out loud. We believe that all students can succeed. They are capable, they have potential. Each student has their own unique patterns of learning.
Sorry, Monica, I believe you're muted.
Oh, thank you. Let me start again. Pardon me. This document from the Ministry of Education can be found on the website. It captures our shared beliefs that I will read out loud to you today, that all students can succeed, that each student has their own unique patterns of learning, strengths, needs, and patterns of readiness. And actually, this information is so helpful in terms of how we collaborate with our families, being the experts of your child. It is very important for us to work collaboratively so that we can learn about the strengths, so that our programming can be incorporating all of the ways that your child learns best. We also believe in our successful instructional practices that are founded on evidence-based research tempered by experience. Teachers assume ownership of all the students in their classes, and special education is not a destination. Next slide, please. How does the process begin? So when we look at some of the tools, we look at the setting of the classroom environment, there are a lot of ways that we can make things work for all students. And again, the information that we learn about your child in terms of the strengths, passions, interests helps us to program for your child in the setting. So we take a look at what's called the universal design for learning. Together with that and differentiated instruction, there are different ways in which we can incorporate tools. For example, whether it's the use of computers or technology or the use of visuals, we recognize that these tools are actually good for all, but perhaps necessary for some of our students. So together again, through our collaborative learning together, we are learning about the types of accommodations that work for your child. We talk about how we can continue our conversations throughout the year so that we can plan to, lower the, increase the potential for students to learn and also decrease the learning gap that we see sometimes. Thank you.
When a teacher brings forward a student to discuss at an IST or SST, they will complete an ILP.
Kelly, I'm going to just ask you to stop your volume on your microphone. Participants are not able to hear you, and I cannot hear you as well.
Can you hear me now? Can you hear me now?
We can't hear you now. I still cannot hear you. And I have participants messaging that they still cannot hear you as well.
Can you hear me now?
Kelly, it's still very low. It's still not audible. Okay, we're just going to give Kelly a moment to get her microphone working.
Can you hear me?
I'm going to start and continue. And Kelly, at any point, please chime in, as well as Laura or Natasha.
Okay.
So the ILP is a document that we're going to spend a little bit of time talking about. It is created and reviewed during consultation with the school-based team. And that looks like teachers, it looks like, administration, and also in partnership with you as family members, we need to discuss, how we can support the student given any information that we have. So again, it could be revisiting some of those strengths and areas of needs in terms of how to design the learning environment, how to incorporate strategies that work. So we're going to look a little bit more into, understanding what that in-school team meeting looks like. And we're going to explore how, comprehensively we can examine some of the programming to better address the student needs that are carried out in some of the interventions as well. Next slide. So this chart outlines the process of a student being brought forward for discussion, first at the IST, the in-school team meeting, and then at what's called the school support team meeting. So prior to the IST, again, we looked at the universal design for learning. We looked at some of the accommodations, and we want to make sure that we try as many as possible, and we try them for a period of time. And when at that point, we need some more information. We looked to going to a different meeting, a second meeting called a school support team, which includes a little bit of a more in-depth, perhaps analysis and feedback from other professionals who we work with collaboratively at our board. And again, it's sort of like a cycle, so it keeps going. So at the point after discussion at the school support team meeting, we might need to periodically revisit some of these conversations throughout the year. And this process is important so that we can document the strategies going forth. I just wanted to check in. Kelly, are you able to present?
Can you hear me now?
We can, thanks.
Oh my goodness, I had to exit. I have no idea. My apologies, and thank you to Monica for taking over.
We're glad to have you back.
Thank you. Okay, so I guess we can go on to the next slide. All right, so the process of the IST and SST helps to build capacity for teachers and support staff, and also provides early intervention and identification of students at risk, and facilitates planning of specific assessments and instructional interventions, provided that equitable and inclusive learning conditions have been established. Next slide, please. So here we have a template of the individual learning profile, and it is filled in with details by the classroom teacher prior to and after the IST and SST. A copy of the ILP is provided to all members, including families, and a copy is placed in the student's Ontario Student Record, OSR. The ILP is helpful to the members of the IST and SST, and it is established to assist and guide teachers in meeting a student's needs. Components of the ILP include updated diagnostic assessments, whether the student has previously been brought to an IST or SST, if an IEP already exists, and if the student is currently in a special education class. The strengths and needs are outlined, as well as the strategies that the teacher has applied so far. There is also a section where all of the logs of previous meetings and the recommendations and follow-up of the outcomes of the recommendations are listed, as well as the staff who have been involved. Next slide. For in-school team, there are specific members who are a part of these teams. In elementary schools, the IST consists of school-based staff, the administrator, and the special education teacher known as the methods and resource teacher, or MART, and also there's also sometimes an additional resource teacher in the school. In secondary schools, the IST consists of school-based staff, administrator, special education teacher, curriculum leader, or assistant curriculum leader, who have responsibilities related to the management and delivery of support to students with IEPs. Next slide. Just to sum up the role of the IST, members collaboratively present and analyze students' strengths and needs, problem solve, share in-school expertise, make decisions regarding next steps, which may include initiating an IEP, document recommendations and follow up on the individual learning plan. Next slide. The members of the school support team are the same as the IST with the addition of the TDSB's professional support service staff, including psychologists, social workers, attendance counselors, speech and language pathologists, occupational therapists, physiotherapists, parents, caregivers, and students over the 16 years of age. When the professional support services staff are a part of the meetings at SST, parental permission is required for the meeting to take place. Students over 16 years of age are also encouraged to participate and must be consulted. Students 18 years of age or older must be invited to attend the SST and give permission for their personal information to be shared with their parents. The role of the school support team. It is similar to the IST in that it is to review and discuss students who may be having difficulty in school with respect to academics, social, emotional, or behavioral concerns. They work collaboratively to develop, monitor, and evaluate action plans and strategies to help the student. The SST recommendations may also include additional strategies and supports, development of an IEP, and a referral to the Identification, Placement, and Review Committee.
All right, so it's time to get all of our participants involved. So again, you can use the chat box to give the answer. So it's either a fact or a myth. So number one, all students who are on an IEP are in a special education classroom. Is it a fact or a myth? Please place it in the chat box. Myth, correct. All students who are on an IEP sometimes may not be in a special education class. They might have accommodations in a regular class or might have a modification of one or two subjects in a regular class. So that's correct. It is a myth. Number two, IEPs only have academic pages included in them. All right, let's see if, what do you think? So when we talk about
Myth,
academic
myth,
pages,
myth.
we're talking about our math, language, social studies, things like that. So that is also a myth. Like I said before, sometimes students may just need accommodations or may have alternative, may need an alternative curriculum. So they might have pages for those or transitions. Thank you.
So now we're going to talk a little bit more about students who we may like to discuss in terms of whether or not they need an IEP. And before or during these discussions, we must consider equity. We must consider anti-oppression. We must consider anti-racism and inclusion in terms of guiding our discussions when we sit at the table together and look at a student's programming and look at students in terms of their overall learning profile. Some of these wonderful guiding questions really center, again, our focus on the student. Who is the student being considered and why? What accommodations can be supported in the classroom that do not require an IEP? And we spoke a little bit about some of these, what's called tier one strategies, strategies that we see in the classroom that are good for all and necessary for some. Again, thinking about best practices, learning a little bit more about the strengths and needs so that we can infuse that within the programming. We also need to consider what support can the teacher be offered to better assist in the programming. Sometimes we seek that guidance through the SST. And we also need to consider, is the IEP even necessary for the student to access the curriculum? During the IST and SST meetings, it might actually then be determined that one is necessary, that we actually begin the process of developing an individual education plan for the student. And the recommendation for the development of an IEP for any given student comes from our discussions with school staff, our collaboration with our families, our collaboration with our professional support services, such as psychology, speech and language, and others. And of course, students. We need to look at how we can incorporate student voice. What does that look like wherever possible? And so again, I just want to stress that at all times, this is a collaboration, and it is the parents' responsibility to ensure that we do inform families about the types of interventions used to assist a student who may be having a difficult time accessing the curriculum. Next slide, please. And again, the two main reasons for an IEP to be developed are captured here on the screen. So the first being that students who are discussed at a different type of meeting called an Identification, Placement, and Review Committee, they must have an IEP completed within 30 school days of placement in a special education program. And this is for students who are exceptional learners. An IEP, again, thinking about what Kelly has expressed to us in this presentation, this could be an outcome from one of the two meetings that she discussed, the first being the in-school team meeting, or the second one, the school support team meeting. Again, thinking about that perhaps a student really requires regular accommodations to access the curriculum, and sometimes the student's program will have modifications, which might be a decrease, maybe a grade level below or more in terms of what goals and expectations we will program for that student. Next slide, please. I want us to, again, think about what it is, and we'll talk about what it isn't. Again, an IEP, it reflects the school board's and the principal's commitment to provide, within the resources available to the school board, the actual special education programming and services needed to meet the identified strengths and needs of the student. And that's why our collaboration with you as family members is so crucial. And again, thinking about student voice. That IEP helps teachers monitor the student's progress and provides a framework for communicating this information. Next slide, please. It also is an ongoing record by which teachers monitor, assess, evaluate, and review a student's programming. And what we love about it is it's a working document. It is subject to change. As we get more information, as information changes, that is something that will be reflected on the IEP. So that flexibility that it gives us is important because we make sure that we align the strategies with the current learning profile that we learn about through our collaboration with you and other partners. It is also an accountability tool for the student, parents, guardians, and anyone and everyone who has responsibilities for helping the student meet those goals. Next slide. And again, an IEP is not a daily lesson plan itemizing every detail of the student's education or a description of everything that will be taught to the student. It's not an educational program or set of expectations for all students. That's why we look to how it can be individualized for that student. And it's not a means to monitor the effectiveness of teachers. Thank you.
Hi, okay, so it's time for the poll again. So again, we're just gonna ask you to put your responses in the chat. So number 3, the IEP will provide services and supports for your child beyond high school. Is that a fact or a myth? Okay, one person is unsure. Anybody else want to take a guess?
I have a fact, a myth.
All right,
Myth.
so it is myth, perfect. So it is indeed a myth. The IEP will provide services throughout your child's schooling, but not beyond high school. When students are applying to college or university, obviously at that point in time, services will be provided from your university, but the IEP is what we use within the TDSB only. And number 4, all students who are formally identified with the board with an exceptionality have an IEP. Is that a fact or a myth? All right, well, I don't see any responses, but it is indeed a fact. All students who are IPRC'd in the board with an exceptionality have an IEP.
Thanks, Natasha. So the time has arrived for your child to have an IEP. When an IEP is started or continued from a previous year, the parent consultation form is sent home to the parent, guardian, or caregiver. For students learning in the virtual environment this year, the consultation form was emailed in a Google format. You can see from the form displayed here the scope of areas covered. This form is a valuable tool for educators to have a broader understanding of your goals for your child. I would highly recommend filling out this form with your child as well, if they're able to participate in it. If you've received the form, you can also ask to have a consultation with the teacher. You check off the box and they should contact you. Please, if they don't, feel free to contact the teacher or the school, and then they will set up a meeting for you. Next, we're going to look at the components, the key components of the IEP. So in consultation with the parent form, the IEP is developed. This diagram represents some of the key components of the IEP, from assessments to areas of strength and need, programming, transitions. All areas interact with each other to inform programming, similar to how a web is interconnected. There are additional areas of the IEP not listed here, but includes individualized equipment, provincial assessments, health support services where applicable. As we take the key components from the IEP, this diagram shows the thread that logically weaves its way from assessment data to the areas of strength and need. This is related to the accommodations and modifications in our programming. The programming is consistently assessed and adjusted, as we mentioned. That's why the IEP is a working document. And the report card reflects the achievement of the IEP programming. It is important to remember the IEP is about how information gathered translates into effective programming for our students. Just before we do the fact or myth, I just wanted to mention that the IEP, as we said, is a TDSB document. If a child moves to another board, then that board, it's very valuable to take that and let them know your child has an IEP, and then that board would decide if the child needs one as well. So having a copy of your IEP is so key, and same for when you're going to post-secondary. If you want to show the post-secondary institution your IEP document, that again will help them, let them know if they can then give some accommodations in their board or their building.
Thank you, Laura. So I see that some of you have already answered the first question. So number 5, the IEP is a flexible working document that must be reviewed and updated at least once in every reporting period. And that is indeed a fact. Monica did touch on this. The IEP is a very flexible working document and can be updated more than even once in a reporting period if needed. Number 6, students have an IEP for accommodations and alternative programming only. A fact or a myth? I just want to see if anybody has put it up. So it is indeed a fact. Some students may have an IEP for accommodations and alternative programming only. And alternative programming, I think Monica touched on this, is when students are working outside of the Ontario curriculum for whatever needs they may have.
Thanks, Natasha. So we're going to just dive into a little bit more about accommodations and modifications. So if we think of accommodations as a pool, on the left-hand side of your screen right now, you'll see accommodations. Everyone's in the same pool, but how they access it is different. How they need to be working within that curriculum could be slightly different, but we're working on the same curriculum. The right-hand side reflects the changes to the pool or the curriculum as needed, such as changing the amount of water in a pool, So maybe they're doing less, maybe they're doing more, or maybe a totally different pool is required. This would relate to modifying the curriculum within the grade level for a subject or teaching it at a different grade level from their peers. On the IEP page 2, where the arrow is highlighting, that's where you would find our accommodations listed, whether instructional, environmental, or assessment accommodations. And that would apply for the entire IEP. For those students who are needing modifications, that was that right-hand side, they are listed on what we generate as page 3s and talk about as page 3s. And at the top part where it's highlighted, you will see we have an annual goal. And this is where we develop this for your child, where we like to see them go by the end of the school year. Now, how we're going to do that is on the other columns. We're going to list our learning expectations to reach those annual goals. And they're broken down and written in this area. And you would notice just to the left of it, you would actually see the grade level as well. Then beside each learning expectation, the teaching strategies specific to your child's learning are listed. And as we mentioned before, this is just what they need consistently and on a regular basis. It wouldn't be a list of everything because what's good for all might not be listed, but if your child specifically needs it, that's where we would list it. And then beside those teaching strategies would be the assessment column. And this is where your child's teacher or teachers will assess and what they'll be using to assessing for the reporting period. As mentioned before, some students would have alternative expectations, and these are developed when a student is not currently working within the Ontario curriculum, or when we need to address areas that are affecting achievement but are not directly related to the Ontario curriculum expectations. These things might involve self-regulation skills, transitional skills, daily living skills, self-advocacy skills, functional academics. Alternative expectations will have page 3s like we've just seen and follow what was previously shown, from creating a yearly goal to specific learning expectations through how we assess these as well.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes.
Great. Okay, so this chart just shows some of the differences of IEP strategies that might be, updated or changed or added to your child's IEP, depending on which learning environment you have chosen for your child or teenager during this time. So these items may continue to change, like I said, or additional items added to improve your child's engagement. And it's very important because parents' input is key to communicate with the teacher as to which strategies are working and which ones are not working. As was mentioned before, the IEP is a working document which continues to evolve depending on the student's need. Next slide.
All right, so these are some educational resources that my colleagues and I have put together. The first one of my favorites, and in the session we did yesterday, so many parents were raving about this, and I'm going to ask Laura if she can just click towards it, Special Needs Roadmap. So the Special Needs Roadmap gives you a thorough roadmap of the resources, websites, policies, and memorandums that our school boards follow in special education. What's also very unique about this website is that for each exceptionality that your child or our students may have, there are the specific websites located right underneath. So it's pretty much the hub of special education. When parents or even educators need to access quick resources, this is an often website that we use. So for any parents, again, caregivers, everybody that's here today, please make note of this website. It's great. One other thing is the acronyms tab. Laura's going to click into it. So a lot of the times as educators, we use a lot of acronyms and we try to practice not doing so when we're in IST and SST meetings with parents. However, just to educate yourself, since these are your kids, There are a list of the acronyms that we use, just in case you get any documents that have anything specifically on it. So for example, ASD, that's what we call it, but we know it stands for autism spectrum disorder. MID, it's the same thing, it's closer up there, mild intellectual disability. So all of these things are very, very good to have. So this is a very good website. The next website that I wanted to highlight is Teaching Special Education on the OTF right here. And so this website, again, is for teachers. It gives effective strategies and resources to support students with special needs. And all of the information is in here again. So it goes through all the different diagnoses student needs, the conditions they may have, and gives thorough explanations of certain things. The last educational resource that I wanted to highlight was the Learning Disabilities Association of Ontario, which provides an in-depth look of learning disabilities as well as ADHD, also known as attention deficit hyperactive disorder. And it gives us 2 options as well. And they also offer online workshops. And there is a list here on the right of your screen, which gives you sort of the live webinars that are happening as well. So if you have, if any of your kids are in need of anything or you're needing strategies, you're more than welcome to go online and register. So I love these questions. So these questions were developed by parents to support parents, like everyone here on this current call, when interacting with staff on how to develop your child's IEP. And some of the questions that I always tell a lot of parents that I've supported is, finding out the first thing, what can you do at home to support the goals that are listed in the IEP? It is a working document. It is something that we teach at the school and we teach from, and we're updating all the time. But if you at home can also, when you're teaching your child, when you're reading with them, follow through with some of those goals, it also helps in bringing your child further in their education continuum. You want to ask the teacher, what does the support look like on a daily basis? Is your child going to be in a classroom that they're going to be receiving special education services for 50% of the day? Or are they going to have a resource teacher come in and assist them during periods like math and language, if that's where they're struggling with? And who will provide the supports? Find out the other educators that will be involved in teaching your child, not just a classroom teacher, whether it's an EA, also known as an educational assistant, or an SNA, a special needs assistant in the classroom. And the last resource links that I just wanted to highlight was first the Special Education Advisory Committee, which is also known as SEAC. So SEAC makes recommendations to the board with respect to any matter affecting the establishment, development, and delivery of special education programs and services for exceptional students of the board. Every Monday, they have a meeting, and you're more than welcome to join. They are electronic right now, and the agenda and the minutes of that meeting, if you're not able to attend, are always posted here on the Toronto District School Board website. This group also participates in the board's annual review of our special education plan. The second resource link that I wanted to pay attention to is the Parent's Guide to Special Education. And the purpose of this parent guide is to provide you with information about the Identification, Placement, and Review Committee, which is also known as the IPRC. It sets out for you the procedures that are involved in identifying as students or as exceptional. It also decides the placements if you would like to appeal a decision, or if you disagree with an IPRC. All the information is located in this document to let you know the steps to take if you need to. The next is the IEP pamphlet. Again, if you still are needing more information in regards to what an IEP is, how to resolve an IEP concern, or when the IEP is developed, this is a hand-on-hand pamphlet that gives you all of that information. very quickly, and it's very easy to read through. And the last resource that I wanted to highlight again is this special education acronyms that we use here at the TDSB. So on the roadmap, that is specific to special education everywhere, but this acronym sheet is specific to the Toronto District School Board and what we use. And again, this is located in our special education plan at the back. Thank you. And so before we close or conclude to our Q&A, I want to thank all of you. My colleagues and I would like to thank everyone for being a part of this conversation today. And we want you to know that the system of special education can feel overwhelming at times and is quite complex. And our children are here to learn and succeed in our school board. And as educators, we are going to push to get them to where they need to go. But with the right tools, moms, dads, grandmas, grandpas, caregivers, guardians, the information that you will manage for your child's education is just fine. And you need to understand that everything is going to happen in slow paces, but as long as you continue to be involved like you are today on a Sunday afternoon, your child will succeed in our school board and will continue to succeed in their educational continuum. Thank you again. And now it's time for questions and answers. So the first question that I have up here came from Marcella. Marcella wants to know the timeline around being able to consult with a teacher on developing the IEP. I'm just going to turn my camera on so Marcella can see me.
Thanks, Marcella. And thanks, Natasha. Marcella, have you received what's called the parent consultation form yet? You can unmute your mic if you'd like to speak.
She did say
Hi, thank you very much. Yes, I did receive the form with the questions, but because I'm unsure of what is like, I don't know when I'm going, at what stages I'm going to be engaged. I think my son had an IEP last year, but I was never engaged. I don't even know how did that plan look like. So my ex-husband and I, we did check on that we want to be contacted, but yeah, I sent an email to the person in the school that is leading this, that is not the principal, but he hasn't got back to me. So, and when I spoke to the teacher, the only thing that the teacher said was that concept of the pool, that everyone will benefit, but he doesn't seem to very knowledgeable about this process. And I feel blind. Like, I'm going to complete the form because I think it was my mistake. I sent it back empty on purpose so they can call me, but they only wanted my signature. I sent my signature, my ex-husband also, that we allowed this kickoff, this process to start. But yeah, I'm lost. So I think it was from listening to you, I think it was my mistake not to complete the form, because I thought those questions were kind of high level, and I wanted to know how am I going to be engaged in the future, because I've never been before. Sorry about that.
So no, thank you. It's an excellent question. So some of our families actually prefer to go over some of those questions either over the phone. And these days, because of COVID, a lot of this is happening either virtually or over the phone. So I would reach out again and perhaps ask for, a meeting so that you can go over some of the areas of strengths and needs. And again, it is an opportunity for you to, articulate how your child learns best. What are some of the goals that, in collaboration with the school that we want to develop so that your child can work towards any of those skills. So that is some of the information that we also incorporate on the IEP. As we mentioned, those areas of strengths are shared with us, and we'd like to include that in terms of the planning of the program. So I would again reach out to the contact who has provided that sheet to you, the teacher. Yes. Again, reach out to the administration, and perhaps it is easier to just do that in an interview over the phone.
Thank you.
Okay.
So my very quickly, my son is starting a new school because he's in grade 6, that is starting of middle school. Would it be okay? I know very well the principal of the previous school. Would it be okay to contact the previous school and say if they can send me a copy of the plan that he had last year to kind of learn from it, or is not something that is available to me as a mom?
If you're referring to the individual education plan from last
Yes.
year,
Yeah,
you should
because
have a copy of
yeah,
that.
I
Yes.
never I never received a copy, and I would like to see how it looked like in order to work
Mhm.
better this year, right?
And as a team, you know, through the electronic files that we store of the IEP from year to year, at some point, you know, they could also access it that way, unless
Oh,
they have a technical issue. They could find it that way as well. But please do reach out to, you know, your contact if you're comfortable reaching to the school. They should, you know, help you out. It depends if they have access to that file.
So,
If your child recently moved, that actual OSR that goes with the child, it either is still at the previous school or maybe it's already transferred at the new school. So the new
so
school should have it.
yes, so that's what I was just going to say, Monica, is that your grade 6 school would be able to provide that for you. Usually at this time of the year, the OSRs would have been moved. Sometimes they're not, just based on this has been an interesting year for all of us. But yes, you can definitely get a copy of last year's IEP and definitely continue to reach out to the school because you are an important part of that conversation and should be involved. And if you find that the classroom teacher is having difficulty connecting with you, then, you know, please leave a message with the secretary of the school as well, and they'll help
thank
find
you.
someone to contact you.
Thank you so much. This is so helpful. Thank you.
No worries. Helena has a question. So she's just concerned in regards to, she would like to understand how the IEP could be used to access funding for services to assist children.
Maybe she could, would she mind unmuting and give us a little bit more specifics, because the IEP is not normally related to any funding through the TDSB.
Well, okay, so the reason I'm asking that is because I'll speak specifically about my son without mentioning names, but he is autistic and has received a diagnosis of developmental delay. So we have an IEP. But what I have noticed is he's just been shuffled off to a congregational school and really does not receive any curriculum-based learning. And I've fought with the school about this forever.
Is he on an alternative curriculum?
He is, but there's no plan in this alternative curriculum to ever get him into the regular curriculum. So he's basically being like, as far as I can tell, he's not getting a curriculum-based education ever, unless I fight. Fighting is the only way, it seems. So what I'm trying to figure out is the IEP. It is a document and made by the school board. And what I'm wondering is there a way, has anybody ever used that to fight to get their child a curriculum-based education? I know that sounds vague, right?
I think the question is very broad, and I think it is an individual education plan, and it really does stem for each child. And I think your concerns and your questions are best met with discussing that at the school level. You can request a school support team that we mentioned before, that SST again, where they can go over the programming and you can be part of that discussion. And often that's a great place to go because we have a professional resource personnel there who can also look at assessments and interpret them for you and help with that process and see if a new assessment is created, and to make sure you understand that the different programs we have, kind of what the pathways from those programs are. But it is really an individualized question. I really personally think the best place and support is at the school. And during those SST meetings, you would have a consultant just like Monica, Kelly, or Natasha there who can also help support you and maybe talk to you a little bit outside of the meeting as well if you have some more specific questions.
Right. But this, okay, I guess at like this document is a TDSB document. Is
Well,
that
the
correct?
IEP has to be created for a child who is deemed exceptional by any board. So the TDSB creates one for the student, yes, and it's their individual education plan based on what they're demonstrating in the school system, and then next steps to move them forward based
Right.
on their
So
learning at that time.
so I think then perhaps maybe I should be a little more specific. So if the school board is not really, or if the teachers in the school are not really showing me that they are helping my son achieve the goal of a curriculum-based education, then what is the next level? What is the next step?
So again, I would just direct you back to the school, because based on a number of factors, some of our students are working on alternative curriculums, and that is their pathway based on assessments and what they're able to achieve at that current time. So I don't think there's a blanket answer for you, and that's why I'm repeating that it is to go back to that school level. And remember that in those meetings, you have your administrator of the school present, the principal, and that's your first stepping stone, and then they can help work with you from there.
Okay, it's 6 years in the making and it's still not getting any further ahead. But anyway, okay, thank you.
Thanks so much. So the next question is also from Cindy. And I think you answered this, Laura, in the presentation. If we switch boards, does the IEP follow, or is it board or provincial specific? So I think, Cindy, we're good with that. The next question, again, is from Phoebe. How will the virtual school take extra actions based on the IEP? Phoebe, what happens here is the virtual schools are creating the IEPs for the students that are in their classrooms. In some cases, the teachers on the ground, so our methods and resource teachers, which are also known as MARTs, are connecting with virtual school teachers to help collaborate and build the IEPs for students that are online. It's not happening in all cases, but in some cases. So you can always touch base with your virtual teacher to find out how that development is going. And you can also, again, be a part of the consultation of developing the IEP.
Hi, and then should I ask, like generally, when the normal time we have the meeting about IEP, not only with the teacher, but also with the principal and some special teachers, and for so now for virtual school, should I request the same type of the meeting, involve several members, or just talk with the teacher, please?
So you wanted to request a meeting with the classroom teacher and go ahead.
And like a specialty teacher, you know, I don't know if it's the same module as in school.
So the virtual schools, I mean, myself and Monica and Kelly, we are still, if your child is in, for example, an ISP class, we are still supporting those classes that are virtual. But right now, from what I am aware of, the conversations are usually happening with the virtual school teacher and the parents.
I see. Okay, thank you.
I'm double clicking. All right, so this next question is from Keen Glee, and if I said that, if I said your name incorrect, please let me know. So Kingsley says his son has an exceptionality in computer and technology, and I might need you to come on to explain that part of it. The child is self-learned and basically wanting to know if he can now apply to get an IEP. He is in grade 10 taking regular courses, and he's looking to get an IEP specifically in science and technology. So I don't know if Kingley, if you can come on to the microphone.
Okay, so thank you, Natasha. So my question is that, my son is very crazy about technology and computer. I'm just wondering whether there is some opportunity for kids who have some exceptionality in certain area, like in my son, it's for computer and science and like this.
Yeah, maybe I'll answer that a bit, Natasha, if that's okay.
Okay, that's
Yeah,
fine.
thank you for
I
that.
think it sounds like he has a great interest in that area, and it sounds
Mhm,
like you're doing a great job supporting that. When we say exceptionalities, they're defined by the Ministry of Education,
mhm.
and they're set ones. So something like a keen interest in science and technology is not an exceptionality for an IEP.
Oh,
Um,
mhm.
but your keen interest is great. You might want to ask the school if they know other, they might have a club or they might know other places that might be of some interest that would just keep that for your child. And I noticed there's been a few questions like, can you request an ISP? Can you apply for an IEP? It's not a process in that sense. I'm hoping the presentation has kind of helped you understand that it's something rooted when your student or your child's having difficulty with the current curriculum. And difficulty means they're not able to really meet the
Oh,
grade curriculum.
okay.
It's not like being, getting a C or a D. Yes, we need to improve, but they're still within the regular curriculum, right? They're still passing the regular one. So it's a collaborative process that's usually started by the teachers when they see the difficulties. And of course, you're part of that. If you're having concerns about the difficulties your child's having, your first contact is the classroom teacher.
Mhm.
And they'll
Okay,
help you from there in the school. Okay.
thank
But
you.
sounds like your son's doing great, and just keep encouraging him to have a love in that.
Yeah, yeah, because he has accelerated to the university level for especially for the computer. So I'm just wondering, it's possible. Okay, thank you. Thank you
Yeah.
for clarification. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you. All right, the next question. Unfortunately, my computer, I'm having some technical difficulties, so I can't see who asked the question. But if you did, you can just turn your mic on and then we can have a conversation. So should we have already received the IEP for our children at this point in the year? So as Monica said earlier in the presentation, IEPs are developed and are sent home within within the first 30 days of the child being into a special education program. Now, because there was a staggered start year, the dates have shifted. So some could have started before or after, but IEPs should be coming home in and around. Some schools have already sent, and I know that some other kids are coming. So just be patient. But if you still haven't received it, I would contact your school just to make sure that it is coming home. But they are going home within these next few days, if they haven't already been so. The next question that I have, the last one, can we request an IEP from the virtual school? So yes, you can. But again, I don't know who asked this question. So I just want to know if you haven't received it yet. Is that why you want to request it?
I believe it was Helen who asked the question.
Okay, Helen?
Hi, yeah, I
There
was
she is.
wondering in the context of because we've requested an exemption from synchronous learning. So I'm
Okay.
wondering, is there anything we should be implementing with regards to like an individual education plan to sort of help support that? Are the two things related at all?
So
Great question.
is your
And
child?
then in this case too, because virtual school, it's like my son's very young, so it's his first experience with virtual school, so
So
it's like a whole new ball game.
yeah, no, if you're requesting that just because the learning style is not working, then that would be fine. The IEP would be putting in place if there was difficulty, in the next few months, seeing actually in doing the curriculum in whatever way it's being presented to you.
Okay.
Yeah. So I think right now, and you can correct me if I'm wrong, I'm making a few assumptions, is that it's just the synchronous learning wasn't working. You wanted an exemption to do it a different way. And then from that, you would see is there being success or not.
Yes, yeah.
Yeah.
And then I guess going forward, if there does continue to be sort of issues, and because who knows what's going to happen with the school year and stuff, in that case, like if there's certain supports that help, for example, you know, dividing the homework up into smaller sections or grouping the day differently with like frequent breaks and stuff like that. Is that
And
something, or is that not necessarily on
that's
an individual education plan, because that could be applied to everybody sort of, like if you request it?
exactly,
Yeah.
exactly. You've got it. I'm so excited that something, yeah, it's exactly
Okay.
that. Like a lot of those things are just what we naturally do for everyone, especially in this new environment. I know breaks are more frequent in general for kids in both environments. Yeah, it would be if it really does initiate from the teacher, and it's, are we needing to have it documented because it's so much more outside of the realm of what we would regularly do as teachers, and that if the child moved from one class to another, that it would be key for them to know. But the things that are just what we do for everyone, those tier 1 strategies, aren't things we create an IEP for. It's what everyone has the right to have.
Okay. Okay.
Yeah.
Perfect. Thank you.
Well, thank you. It is 1:16 and another group will be starting their presentation that we all must get to. However, I just want to thank everybody for coming in today for our presentation. And also there was a question in regards to the presentation. It will be posted as Parents as Partners link on the TDSB website. So that way you will be able to access it and also have the access to all the links that we've shared with you today. Thank you all, and take care and enjoy the rest of your weekend.
Thank
Bye-bye.
you. Enjoy the rest of your weekend.